I really don't think I have to sing Doom's praises. If you've played a first-person shooter in the past, well, whenever, you have Doom to thank for it, as it put the first-person shooter genre on the map. So it seems obvious that such a landmark game would get a big-budget movie adaptation, and that's exactly what happened in 2005, when Dwayne Johnson and Carl Urban co-starred in, well, Doom. But what should have been a slam dunk success ended in a $4 million loss for Universal. So, what went wrong? I'd first like to take a look at the games that inspired the movie, specifically Doom and Doom 3, and from there, tackle the film and figure out why it was received as badly as it was. Even though the movie was based primarily off of Doom 3, it's important to understand the roots of the franchise because they inform the entire expectation of any project with the Doom name. So, the first Doom game, released in 1993, tasks the player, in control of the Doom Guy, with making their way through a military research base on Mars, eradicating zombified marines and demons fresh from the gates of hell as they go. Actually, the game doesn't even tell you that much. You have to read the manual for that. You're just playing as an angry dude with a gun who runs into zombies and demons and shoots them in the face. And that's exactly what you do throughout the entirety of the game. You navigate complex, labyrinthian levels at a breakneck speed, gunning down everything in your path, finding new weapons along the way. There's not much of a story except what you do as a player, and only enough of a premise to contextualize you running around shooting things. And God said it was good. Keep in mind that everything I just said is true of the new 2016 Doom as well. You wake up as an angry dude strapped to an altar, break out and immediately start killing things. What more do you really need for a great shooter? Doom 3 apparently had a few ideas. Released in 2004, this iteration of Doom was a reboot of sorts, that again put you in the boots of a nameless marine on a quest to rip and tear all of hell's demons in twain. But first, you had to walk a bit, and listen for a bit, and walk a bit, and walk a bit more, and punch some turkeys, and walk a bit, and listen for a bit, and read your PDA a bit, and walk a bit, and wait a bit. Alright, the whole cinematic storyline thing was pointless and dumb, but at least within 15 minutes you were on your way to blowing goblins away with glee, just like old times. Doom 3 took some major influences, not from the arcade shooters of the 90s, but from survival horror shooters, like Half-Life. It's a slower, more deliberate, more atmospheric Doom. And maybe that's why it feels odd to me. Not necessarily bad, but to go from the shooting gallery frenzy that Doom is, to something closer to the Ravenholm sequence from Half-Life 2 seems like an unexpected direction to take. True, there is some sense of creepy dread in the atmosphere of the original Doom, but you're usually too busy dodging fireballs and undead sergeants to let it affect you. Doom 3 slows you down, placing a limit on your sprinting and power-ups and favoring more bullet-resistant enemies to try to control the pace down to a cautious tiptoe. While I, as a player, want to exercise my God-given right to dash down the corridors, firing my shotgun with gay abandon. I think Doom 3 handled this new direction fine, especially given the time when it was released, but I'm not sure it's the same direction I would have taken it in. So perhaps you can understand some of my frustration with the Doom film adaptation, as it was mostly based on the Doom 3 title, not the original Doom. See, when I think of Doom, I think of this. Not this. Guess which one you see more of in the Doom movie. Buckle up because this will not be a positive review. I'll focus on the three usual aspects: mechanics, aesthetics, and story, particularly how the Doom movie adapts each of these from the games. Firstly, the story. Doom follows a group of Marines known as the Rapid Reaction Tactical Squad as they are sent in by the United Aerospace Corporation to investigate and quarantine a not-so-mysterious threat at their Mars research facility, which turns out to be, surprise surprise, demons from hell. Except they're not. They're a genetic science project gone horribly wrong. And as the Marines are picked off one by one and start turning into zombie monsters themselves, the quarantine mission turns into search and destroy. The story is probably the aspect of the movie that I have the greatest criticism against. In summary, it's boring, cliched, predictable, and stupid. Remember how memorable the Marines and aliens were, even though there were many names and faces to keep track of? Doom's Marines are each walking stereotypes with handy nicknames, and yet they're still forgettable. You have the hopeless ladies' man, the eager rookie, the no-nonsense soldier, the everyman, the Bible thumper, the Asian who doesn't matter, and of course, the Sarge. The only one of any interest is Porter, and even then is only a caricature of the filthiest, sleaziest, weirdest uncle you know. And for some reason, instead of actual names, they have the kind of code names that you'd find at a 12-year-old's laser tag birthday party. I mean, Destroyer? The Kid? Reaper? Come on. The movie already does enough pandering short of saying, this ain't no video game. It could at least make an attempt at creating believable people. Unfortunately, these caricatures don't even make convincing soldiers. Yes, I'm fully aware I should suspend my disbelief for, of all things, a Doom movie, but if it's going to take itself so seriously, I'm going to hold its feet to the fire regardless. Despite the actors apparently receiving training from an ex-Special Forces operative prior to filming, these Marines fail to uphold the most basic combat survival principles that any recruit straight out of boot camp should know by heart. Things like, always communicate, call for reinforcements as soon as necessary, don't split up, never leave your battle buddy, don't give your job to an untrained civilian, and, oh yeah, don't aim your weapons at each other's heads. Compared to how superhuman the original Doom guy, or even the nameless Marine in Doom 3 is, these Marines are about as competent as Bill Murray's platoon in Stripes. There's an attempt to garner some sympathy for the protagonist, with a dead parent's backstory, but it falls flat because we don't care for the protagonist to begin with. And why should we? He's a 30-something white male stereotype of a soldier and not much else. That may be fine enough for a video game like Doom, but I need something more if I'm going to empathize as a moviegoer. And it's here I'd like to step away from Doom for a moment to distinguish between what makes a video game character interesting versus what makes a movie character interesting. Movie characters are interesting primarily in who they are and what choices they make in response to conflict standing between them and a goal, and most importantly, why they make these choices. For example, let's look at the Blues Brothers. On the surface, Jake and Elwood are merely two good-natured criminal brothers. But then we learn that they're the singing, dancing leaders of a classic blues band. That's who they are. Their main goal for the story is to settle the tax bill for the orphanage that raised them by getting the band back together for a blowout concert. That's what they want. And the driving force for their adventure is not only a debt of gratitude owed to the orphanage that raised them, but a divine commission for their quest. That's why they do what they do. But the real meat of the story that makes it unforgettable is the myriad of obstacles placed in the way of that goal that test the big why behind the Blues Brothers' journey, and the choices they are willing to make to overcome those obstacles. It's because they're on a mission from God that they're willing to drive through an Illinois Nazi rally, steal a gig from the good old boys, dodge a vengeful ex-girlfriend, and plow through the entire Illinois law enforcement community. That's what makes Jake and Elwood fleshed out characters and makes us care about what they care about. Having a kick-ass soundtrack certainly doesn't hurt. So how does this carry over to video games? What makes a video game character interesting? It's difficult to make any hard and fast rules, since video games vary on such a wide scale. In the case of Doom, the focus is not on who the character is or what they do, but what they enable the player to do. Who is the Doom guy? We barely know beyond Angry Super Soldier. What does he want? Because of the way the rules of the game are set up, you win by advancing to the next level, demons hurt you, you can shoot back but need health and ammo, and it's game over if you die. It's clear that the Doom guy himself must want to advance through the Mars complex, survive, and shoot every last demon in the face. What makes this so great is that this is exactly what the player wants. The player wants to overcome the same challenges as the Doom guy. He or she wants to participate in the fantasy of blowing away the armies of hell. And because they play as a character who is uniquely equipped to do that, it's easier for the player to psychologically become the Doom guy. That's why he works so well despite his threadbare personality. In fact, it's because of it. Back to the movie. The very reason why the empty shell nature of Doom guy allows him to work so well as a video game character is the same reason why the Marines in the Doom movie do so poorly. Because video games are played and movies are watched, Doom guy is empty for a purpose. He could be worn by the player like a suit of armor. But this guy is empty for no purpose, like a pie crust with no filling. I can't sympathize with these Marines because they give nothing to sympathize with. Since I have no other way of interaction with them, I'm only left disengaged and bored throughout the movie. That is a cinematic failure. There are problems with the story beyond the characters. The pacing is just awful. The first scene shows a scientific research facility under attack by monsters, and the next hour slowly tells you again and again that, yes, this is indeed a scientific research facility under attack by monsters. Why in the world does it take over an hour to disseminate this information? The original game does it in 10 seconds. Mars landscape, sciencey looking building, zombies dressed as soldiers, literal demons. I get it. I could put it together myself, thank you very much. This is the same problem that Doom 3 had with its change of tone from the first Doom. It relies far too much on tell, don't show, instead of show, don't tell. In short, the story is vapid, weak, and assumes the viewer can't work out which shoe goes on which foot without being told. Aesthetically, this movie is okay. Not terrible, but not great. I don't like the fact that most of the movie is severely underlit, like the cinematographer has the night vision of a cat, or kept forgetting his lights at home. There's a minimum of noticeable bad CGI for the time, except for some simple wire removal that was obviously forgotten. I will give proper credit to the makeup and creature effects of this film. It's plain to see from the behind-the-scenes featurettes that a lot of thought and care was put into their execution, and the same can be said for the most memorable sequence of the movie, the first-person shooter scene. Towards the end of the movie, Reaper is given a drug that's responsible for the monster outbreak at the facility, but for plot reasons instead gives him a hyper-healing factor, higher pain tolerance, and quicker reflexes, among other things, and his new abilities are put on display through a first-person shooter scene from his perspective. And I gotta say, it's actually pretty good. A lot of planning and work was put in to make the scene seem as video gamey as possible, with many clever edits used to give the illusion of one unbroken take, much like how a video game session would appear. It feels too floaty and slow to feel like a proper video game, but that's not the point here. The point is that a group of filmmakers, many of which are not gamers, managed to make a scene that is exciting and engaging enough for a gaming audience. It's no Hardcore Henry, and it's not enough of an achievement to save the movie, but credit where credit's due. This particular scene presents a very interesting melding of video game mechanics with the aesthetics and techniques of film. On the surface, it's got everything a first-person shooter has except a HUD. The perspective, gun on screen, shooting guys left and right, reloading, and graphics that were certainly better than any game at the time. And up until Hardcore Henry, I never thought something like this would actually stand firm for an entire movie. But what Hardcore Henry managed to do was tailor the action, the story, the characters, everything to be of service to the idea of first-person shooter, the movie. It's why Henry's a cyborg, why Jimmy used clones to effectively respawn. It's why Henry's eyes are literally cameras. So many of the decisions made, both big and large, were to serve the first-person shooter conceit. And I feel that's where Hardcore Henry pulled something like this off far better than Doom. And yet, as aesthetically pleasing as the first-person sequence is, something feels wrong about it. It feels empty in an almost intangible sense, and the same goes for Hardcore Henry. Both movies share the same problem of adapting an interactive media to a non-interactive one. With both movies, there's the perceived intimacy between the viewer and the action on screen due to the camera's perspective, but that cannot be a viable substitution for the actual direct engagement between a player and the game's action. No matter how well executed a first-person scene may be, there is still a wide physical and psychological gap between me and the scene, as I have no input on it. I can only watch. But Doom's earnest yet misguided effort at the idea comes across the same way a yearly phone call to an estranged, aging, out-of-touch uncle does. At equal times, a half-hearted attempt at relevancy and a sad plea for help. What a shame. The bottom line is this. Movie adaptations need to be exceedingly aware of what the uses and limitations of their medium are, and adjust the adapted work accordingly. Movies need to appeal to us through sympathetic characters wrapped up in an engaging story told through the audio-visual language of film. These adaptations cannot rely, as Doom did, on paper-thin characters meandering through a cliched, tiresome story, as there's little else the film can offer to make up for it, and a slick visual effects segment is certainly not enough. It is enough, however, to ensure that the movie was doomed to fail. I'm so sorry. Thank you for watching this episode of Screen Jumper. I would love to have you as a subscriber if you are not one already. Use the like or dislike buttons or leave a comment to let me know what you thought about this video, and be sure to check out my previous episodes. Once again, this has been a case study from Saboteur Studios. Thank you for watching.
Hey you, up here, quickly. I thought I was the only one still alive.